Hello and welcome to Crucible of Words for more dedicated legacy action. Today we are exploring the energy shell a little bit and trying to do something a touch different with it today. So, Voice of Victory has been a pretty interesting card in Legacy. It's been finding itself in a bunch of spots. And the fact is, it can attack for a decent amount of damage whilst also stopping your opponent from interacting. Now, generally speaking, people are using this to play like just a bunch of creature decks and making use of the tokens with Goblin Bombardment and stuff like that. And the fact that your opponent doesn't get to interact with you means that you can resolve a few spells here and there. But what if we try to resolve some absolutely game-breaking spells when we have Voice of Victory in play? So, our deck has 2 copies of Armageddon, 2 copies of Ravages of War. This is the sort of card where if you're ahead, you can just pop this, and if it's not going to be countered, you know it's going to work, your opponent's going to lose all their lands, and they're just not playing the game anymore. That is obviously a very powerful thing you can do. Once upon a time, White Weenie decks used to do this as a main part of their game plan. They basically just curve out and then cast Armageddon, and then your opponent would just not be able to come back from there. We can also break the parity on this by playing some Flagstones. So when these go, we go and get ourselves some planes who are already sort of getting back into the game. So that's what we're trying to achieve today. We've got a lot of stuff that we've seen in other decks already. So we've got the Guide of Souls Ocelot Pride, like the energy core here. We have Ajani, which obviously makes tokens. So it's going to give us more stuff for the Ocelot Pride, more stuff for the Guide of Souls. We have Staff the Storyteller. You usually see this in the black-white energy build. So this just gets to make a load of extra value for us when we're making tokens off of these things. And it allows us to just sort of keep drawing all the things we need. Also, a flying blocker isn't the worst either. We've got some Swords to Plowshares and some Static Prisons to deal with our opponent's stuff. I'm trying out the Sand Scout tech, which I played against once and it looked really good. So it's a 2-mana 2/2. When it enters, if an opponent controls more lands than you, search your library for a desert card, put it on the battlefield, tap, then shuffle. Whenever one or more land cards are put into your graveyard from anywhere, get a 1/1 token. So this token it makes is red, white, and green. So it will allow the backside of Ajani to do its thing, which is really important. And when we Armageddon, we get an extra body out of it. And the one desert we're looking for here is Lazotep Quarry. So it's taps for colorless, or you can tap and sacrifice a creature to add 1 mana of any color, or the actual ability we care about, X2 tap, sacrifice a desert, so basically itself, exile a target creature card with mana value X from your graveyard, create a token that's a copy of it, except it's a 4/4 black zombie, activate only as a sorcery. So for 3 mana and tap, this could go and get us a 4/4 Ocelot Pride. That's pretty good in my eyes. So I've played against this before and it looked pretty good, and because we can fit it in the mono white shell a lot more easily, we've also got a couple of additional lands that you might not have seen before. This is HELIOS One. It taps for colorless. You can pay 1 and tap it to get an energy counter. So something I've discovered sometimes playing these Static Prison decks is if you don't have the Guide of Souls, it can sometimes be difficult to keep this under wraps. HELIOS One just gives us a way where, yeah, we can pay a couple of mana to keep something under wraps. And that's fine. It can kind of bridge the gap until we get like some more Guide of Souls action. But then it has this other ability which is real good. 3 tap, pay X energy. Sacrifice this land. Destroy target non-land permanent with mana value X. Activate only as a sorcery. So if we've got a bunch of energy ticking up here, we can basically blow up anything using one of our lands. That is very powerful, and I'm curious to see how it pans out here. This is from the Fallout set, I believe, which is not exactly a set I'm the most familiar with. In our mana base, we've also got a Karakas and some Wastelands as well, but that's pretty much the deck. Sideboard-wise, we've just got a bunch of tools to hit some of the combo decks. So we've got Deafening Silence, we've got Null Rods, Disruptor Flute, 3 Grafdigger's Cage, a couple of Ghost Vacuums. We've got some Mindbreak Traps as well, and then just a couple of Path to Exile. If our opponent's playing like a mid-range deck that's a bit bigger than us, we can path them and then Armageddon, so it takes another land out of their deck as well. So yeah, let's try some Weenie Geddon. This is like a blast from the past, because this was a deck that, when I first started playing Magic, was kind of fringe at that point, but had been like a big deck beforehand. So let's see how it stacks up in 2025 with some of the newer tools we have available. Like, subscribe, and let's get geddoning. Have you got Magic cards you don't want taking up space in your home, or do you just need some extra spending money? Well, my lovely sponsors, 3for1 Trading, are buying all collections, big and small. They are one of Europe's biggest traders and have a transparent process to sell them cards and make sure you're getting a good deal. Click the link in the description of this video to get an offer on your cards today. Got a bit of a weird opener here. It's very like defensive, which isn't necessarily where I want to be with this deck. I think we're going to mulligan something with some 1-drops in. Alright, we found some 1-drops. I will keep this. What are we looking to bin off here? These are kind of a combo. This is kind of a combo. Probably want to keep the plow. It's just a nice tool to have. Our opponent's mulligan to 5 there. Maybe this is not going to be a Swords to Plowshares matchup. Let's be the aggressor as best we can. We're going to die on turn 1. Mox Diamond. Okay, so we're looking at lands. Being off a Karakas, sure. Okay, so we're looking at green-white depths, I would imagine. So I would have liked to plow. Another Guide of Souls. That's pretty interesting. Probably get some value off the Sand Scout soon. An Elvish Reclaimer. No follow-up land, though. A Wasteland of our very own. Okay, I guess we go Guide of Souls. And then we're just going to Wasteland this Dryad Arbor while our opponent is missing land drops. Sorry to be the bad guy, opponent. They could have a crop rotation here. That's pretty good. Yep, there it is. This means the Sand Scout might be picking something up soon. Right, our opponent has Flagstones. Not great for our Armageddon plan. But they are a land-centric deck, so Armageddon is going to be relatively useful here. Just not specifically right now. Although I imagine they're going to turn this into another land with their Reclaimer this turn cycle. 1 card in hand. Is it something we have to care about or not? Plains. I like the plains here. If we play the Ajani, we start cranking up towards... We end up with enough energy here. Because we're going to get loads of triggers. So we're going to attack with the Guide of Souls, and we're going to pump our little friend. Just gets cracking for 3 here. We've got a pretty good board. So we can attack him with the Cat Warrior next turn to try and flip our Ajani. And we can Sand Scout. And then if a land goes into our graveyard for any reason, then our Ajani's backside is going to be doming huge amounts of damage as well. Alright, and Urza's Saga is what our opponent wanted. I think we can probably beat just some constructs. Now, when they start sticking shadow spears and whatnot on them, it can get a little bit sketchy. But we can threaten the block with the Cat Warrior. Let's see what we draw, and then we can navigate from there onwards. Staff of the Storyteller. Is this where I want to be? We could just get the value off of this Sand Scout right now. I think I like getting the Sand Scout going. They could sacrifice a land and fail to find, but I don't think that's really where they want to be. I'll play out this other Lazotep Quarry. So this and this can come in. So we're attacking for 6 in the sky. Next turn we can attack for more. Alright, they just had enough. Okay, so a lands deck. I think that does mean we want the Armageddons, even though it can be a touch awkward. So things I am interested in this particular matchup. These are things I'm interested in. Whether or not we fit them in remains to be seen, though. So this isn't really a great matchup for Voice of Victory, but again, it does still just produce loads of tokens that lets us pop off with this Staff of the Storyteller. How useful is the Sand Scout? Our opponent's going to have more lands than us a lot of the time, so it's going to find some stuff. And Lazotep Quarry, most of our creatures aren't dying, so maybe the Sand Scout isn't actually where we want to be, even though it does trigger the backside of Ajani. So that gets us a couple of plows. Oh, sorry, a couple of paths. And then do we want Disruptor Flute, or are we just trying to kill their creature? I think we're just trying to kill their creatures, aren't we? Do we want Ghost Vacuum for things like potential life from the loam? Or are we just going to say we can probably just get around that? We would try and... If they got no lands, they can't loan back anything, right? We're going to try our darndest to not board out these Armageddons, but there will be matchups like Oopsal Spells where we just have to go, okay, this isn't an Armageddon matchup. Okay, we've got Guide of Souls, 2 removal spells, Voice of Victory, just some good old-fashioned White Weenie beatdown. Mox Diamond, pitching a Yavimaya, and we're going to see a Sylvan Library. Do I want to Static Prison this, or do I just let it ride and just get the damages in? I think we just get the damages in. Just try and make some guys, turn them sideways. It's a respectable way to play Magic the Gathering, isn't it? They didn't take any extra cards, and now they're using a crop rotation to shuffle. That is a Tabernacle. Understood. Life from the Loam, getting back Savannah and Yavimai's Cradle. Okay. I'll describe this as quite awkward for us. A Karakas. How are we intending to beat what our opponent's putting down? We'll deploy a Guide of Souls and start attacking for small bits of damage. We do have a Wasteland, but they have the Loam. So we need to find a way to deal with that. Maybe we are supposed to have the Ghost Quarter in here. Sorry, not the Ghost Quarter, the Ghost Vacuum. Voice of Victory is 3 bodies, but only counts as 1 for Tabernacle purposes. Another crop rotation here. There's a Wasteland. We're going to lose our Karakas. Is this game worth playing any longer? Our opponent's got us in a bit of a bind. I'll take another draw step. I think we're probably just going to go to game 3 here. Ocelot Pride isn't great here, so we can play the Wasteland and fire it off on our opponent's end step, but I just think we're going to be locked out here. We just need to draw some lands. I just don't really want to continue playing this, and I don't think it's going to be particularly enjoyable content. So, do I want the Vacuum? We just say no to the Sound Scouts entirely and just have the Vacuums. It does make our Ajani's worse, because we're never going to get the red activation. It's just going to be making cats. That's still fine. Okay. Let's make some cats. I like the fact that we have a lot of mana here. It's going to be a bit more difficult for our opponent to just windmill us out of the game with some sort of loam lock. Okay, have a Mox Diamond. One time, could you now have the Mox Diamond, please, opponent? I'd appreciate that. A Sylvan Library, sure. Right, we're going to get our 1 damage in with this Ocelot Pride. That's going to give us some tokens to work with. So we're going to play this Staff the Storyteller and get that ticking up. This is also a flying blocker, which might be useful in the face of a Dark Depths. So we can draw an extra card every turn with our Staff the Storyteller. Right, they're not taking any extra cards here. They don't want to spend a life. A Tabernacle, you say, and a Disruptor Flute. Not in love with seeing the Tabernacle again. There's probably a singleton in our opponent's deck, and they didn't have to tutor for it this time, which is annoying. They've named Wasteland with Disruptor Flute. Interesting. Okay, I think we let the cat die. Do we let... We're obviously going to keep the Ocelot Pride. Do we keep the Spirit Token? I think it's just going to be a burden around our neck, isn't it? I think we say no to this. And then we can pay for the Ocelot Pride. And we can make an Ajani. And then we can let the other cat die from the Ajani. It flips our Ajani, so we don't have to pay for the Ajani. And we're kind of getting somewhere here. I don't think we're in Plower and Creature territory yet, but that is an option we have available to us. So, as long as it doesn't stack the triggers the wrong way for us, we should be okay here. An Elvish Reclaimer, sure. Just some guy. Understood. Swords to Plowshares on the Ajani, that is annoying. Not going to pay for this. I will pay for the other 2, I think, here. An Armageddon. Well, our opponent's not really going to see that one coming, are they? Okay, Ajani. It's your time to shine. I think we might get an absolute blowout with this Armageddon. I don't think they're going to block this Cat Warrior. So we could wait one more turn and then path to exile this guy so they can't get a Flagstones. So I'll say no to this one. We then flip to the Ajani so we don't have to pay for it. Am I going to keep this guy? I don't think so. Actually, we may as well keep this guy. I think we'll keep this one as well. So we want to draw a card now. Ocelot Pride, okay. So we can make both of these creatures bigger, but that doesn't help us that much. We can create another token, just to make sure we're not getting bodied by anything. Sure. I just want to make sure that we have our Ajani going into the next turn. Because the next turn is the Armageddon turn, I think. So we path away this Reclaimer, then we just Armageddon our opponent. What are they finding here? Just going to be a Flagstones for value. This also shuffles their library, which is an important thing. When you've got a Sylvan Library on the go, you want to make sure that you can keep changing the cards that you're seeing. A Yavimaya. So we could have pathed this guy in response to... sorry, at the end of turn. After they've done all their stuff. But I think the plan is to just blow our opponent out. Alright, another thing that's going to get caught up in our Armageddon. This is going to be sweet. Oh, go on. Use your Ravages of War right now. A Green Sun Zenith X equals 1. And this is just going to be another Reclaimer. That's pretty good. We get rid of the Summoning Sick one. Oh, sorry, the non-Summoning Sick one. Thespian Stage. Be my guest. So we're going to say no to all of these, just so we can get this Armageddon going. This is going to be sweet. 1, 2, 3, 4. Alright, our opponent doesn't have any lands. That's a good sign for us. I'm going to go and get... It comes into play tap, so we may as well get an Elegant Parlor because Wasteland's already shut off. So we may as well get that sweet Surveil action on the go. A Guide of Souls. That's okay, we've already got one. I'd rather have more lands. Let's make a cat to block with. So our opponent has a library, so them finding more lands is certainly a doable prospect here. We're hoping to dodge Life from Malone long enough that we can kill our opponent or get something that stops the Tabernacle coming back. If there's no lands there, does our opponent pay a bunch of life? They do pay a bunch of life just to get there. I see. Interesting. Okay, they have a removal spell, so they get to kill our Ajani, which is unfortunate. Would love to draw a land this turn. So maybe back when we made that cat token, we already had cat tokens. If we'd have put a +1/+1 counter instead, our Ajani would have lived through an attack with Ravages of War if we'd have thought that far down the track. Alright, they're going to go get Dryad Arbor here. They have a second one? They do. Or was that a different game where they had the other one? I think it was actually, wasn't it? Okay, our Armageddon, not quite where we needed it to be. So we could try and draw a card here to try and hit the land drop. I think that's what we actually have to do here. We did hit the land drop. Excellent. Rewarded. Okay, let's get this Guide of Souls in. And then we can start doing the Ocelot Pride thing again. And if we need to, we're building up to another Armageddon effect. Our opponent can take one additional card off his library, and that'll put them to 2, which might be a bit precarious if we can put enough stuff in to get the energy to jump and bap them in the sky. Sure, we've got loads of life to work with. Okay, a Knight of the Reliquary. We probably have to answer this one. It is quite large. HELIOS One. So we don't need to get an additional land off of this. This is white mana we need for this, though. So we have to go Static Prison, get rid of this Knight, play the Ocelot Pride, gets us a bit of energy. I'll play this HELIOS One. We can't really do much with it right now. This is also another way to sacrifice cats to flip the Ajani as well. We can make this jump, can't we? That seems like a good use of our mana. In response to the Static Prison trigger, we can make another energy with our Helios. Actually, no, we're going to get an energy off of this Ocelot Pride anyway. Alright, we have a flying blocker. Can you beat it? Oh, sorry, a flying attacker. They might have something like a Talon Gates of Madara they can use to phase out our attacker. So I might have to keep the Ravages of War back on blocks for that. Yes, okay, that looks like what might be happening here. So we already have the one energy, so we don't need to use the HELIOS One here. We can just pay the energy. This, how much is this? 1 is just the 1, yeah. So I'll say yes. I think we draw a card first here. Staff the Storyteller. Do I want another flying blocker or do I just want Voice of Victory? Voice of Victory means that our attackers are going to be going wide next turn. Sure, I like this. Here comes the voice. Crop Rotation. Okay. What fresh hell is this going to be for us? Maze of Ith. Okay, that's how they're intending to get around all of this. So we attack here. They have to use the maze. Yep. They use that crop rotation to shuffle their Sylvan Library as well. But next turn, we're going to have enough energy because we can stack these triggers so that we get the Voice of Victory triggers. Do they have a second Tabernacle though? That could be a bit awkward for us. A Yavimaya. Okay. Alright, our opponent's scooping it up. So, we won our first round because of the Armageddon. This was actually the thing that won us this game, was casting Armageddon. So, proof of concept in the first match already. Beautiful. Stick with it. Let's have some more White Weenie action. We are on the play. We have a bit of a weird one here. This is one of those, we can answer all their creatures, then get in, and then hopefully win the game. It's not really our primary game plan, though. I think we should mulligan to something that's a bit more aggressive. Okay, Staff the Storyteller is reasonable. I'll keep this one and probably bin off a basic Plains. Flagstones replaces itself anyway. Karakas is useful in some matchups. We can bounce out Tamios or a giant Atraxa. And then we can just try and leverage this Staff of the Storyteller. So I think we just play out a basic Plains on one. I don't think there's any need to play out the Karakas here. You can get Wastelanded and stop us hitting the Staff of the Storyteller. And our opponent will play differently if they see a Karakas. So we won't get the value off of it. We could do if they don't know it's coming. They're making this boop something out when they're not expecting it. No play for our opponents. This could just be an end of an entomb at our end step. That's the sort of world we're living in these days. Alright, let's try a Staff of the Storyteller. What we don't want to see is entomb and daze. Alright. But we can beat a monster, in theory, with the Source to Plowshares. This could just be a Surveil land. An untapped source here is very scary, though. Uh-oh. We're getting entombed upon? Yep. I'm afraid for the foreseeable future, you will be seeing a Blue-Black Reanimator deck in pretty much every league we play. It's 20% of the meta, and I can only see it going up, to be honest. Okay, they've gone for an Atraxa. Do they have it this turn? They might not have it. They might just be investing in the future. Of course they have it. Yep, sure. Okay. Atraxa, what are you doing? Brazen Borrower, Island, Thoughtseize, Murktide Regent, Daze. So they get to Thoughtseize us as well. Yuck. Not a big fan of this. Right, so took Polluted Delta, Tamiyo, Thoughtseize, and Daze. So they're probably going to Thoughtseize away our Plow here. But we still have the Karakas. Goodbye, Source of Plowshares. The Karakas kind of does the same thing here anyway. Like being in play or being in their hand. Sorry, being exiled or being in their hand is pretty similar in terms of how it impacts the game. And we also have this delightful HELIOS One we can start doing some stuff with soon. I have to go to clean up. What are they getting rid of? Another entomb. Their cup runneth over. So, do I want to be going after their lands here? I don't know, is the answer to that one. I think Karakas is the obvious thing that has to get into play first. So let's draw a card. A Guide of Souls. I'm willing... Am I willing to play this into a Daze that we know about? I don't think so. Let's just boop the Atraxa out. This Karakas is going to do incredible work for us. So HELIOS One also answers Planeswalkers. It's kind of like a blast zone for energy decks. I think this card might actually be secretly really good. Okay, we're getting entombed upon again. Okay. Cool. There's an Archon of Cruelty. Are we just putting this into play? Why wouldn't you? Oh no, okay. It's a Murktide Regent. Okay. Well, this is obviously a problem of different proportions. We will endeavour to find a way through. So... we can't make any tokens to draw extra cards this turn. We can deploy a Guide of Souls. I don't know if there's any point wastelanding our opponent here. I think we just want to get the HELIOS One on the go. And start making some energies. It's not likely to do a great deal here. But if we get like the right run of permanents to like block our opponent's creature. Like if we get another Staff of Storyteller, we can block for a turn, draw 2 cards, generate energy the whole time. Maybe we can fire off a HELIOS One big enough to kill a Murktide. Yeah, I don't think going after our opponent's land was the correct choice. Do we block here? Or do we just take it? I think I take it this turn and block next turn. That is a Tamiyo. So now we have to play Tamiyo Chicken. Where if we bounce this, they brainstorm. Not a lover of the old Tamiyo Chicken. A Wasteland. I think we are playing it. And I will hit their Underground Sea here. So we're just trying to create a window where we can maybe bounce this without worrying about the brainstorm. Petty Theft on the Guide of Souls. Okay. Play the Guide of Souls. I don't think I'm attacking here. I think the play here is if our opponent cracks an end step, we bounce it. Otherwise, you can bounce it in their turn. We do it at the beginning of combat step. So I don't get a clue. They can brainstorm here. It's annoying, but we're already so far behind that we can't, yeah, you know. Best deck in the format is the best deck for a reason, right? Shall we say goodbye to the creature planeswalker, the creature Tamiyo, and now they have a planeswalker Tamiyo. So we can chump block here, generate some energy. We can just blow up this Tamiyo next turn, if that's what we're worried about. But we are worried about a numerous selection of things, to be honest. Just get some energy. Static Prison. So we can play the Static Prison, take out the Murktide. How are we coping versus the Brazen Borrower? Or is that a problem we worry about later? I think it's a problem to be worried about later. So Static Prison. Force of Will. Cool, 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 cool. I think... What do they pitch that? The Atraxa, okay. I think we just have to get rid of this Tamiyo. We don't have energy to get rid of anything else. Attacking is pointless here because it's just going to go and get minus because the Tamiyo bubble is still there. It's a delayed trigger. Rather than a thing that requires Tamiyo to be in play. So they're going to put this Borrower, they're going to put us to 1 this turn. And then what do we need to draw to win this one? Staff the Storyteller. We play Staff, it gives us card draws. The card draw finds us removal. So we do have an out. So we will play to it. 8, 9, 10, 11. Yeah, we are one shy of dying. I don't think there's any way that we can get lethal damage on our opponent, even though they're only on 5 here. But it's going to be difficult for decks to beat the turn 2 Atraxa. We had a pretty good stab at it. We bounced their creature, but the amount of value it accrued is just like another 4 cards or whatever. And that's like turn 1. So they're basically starting the game... Oh, sorry, turn 2. So they're basically starting the game with 50% more resources than we are. So it's always going to be difficult to come back from that. But if we get the right draws here, we might be able to squeeze out a win. But there's also the threat of them just reanimating Archon of Cruelty at any given moment and we die. But if we can draw the Staff, then we're A-OK. Have they got a reanimate effect? Does it animate dead? Or is this just another Murktide? It's another Murktide. We are dead because it's going to grow the first one. Alright. Blue Rat Reanimator. So, Grafdigger's Cage, Ghost Vacuum. I would also like some removal spells. These things seem pretty good. Do I want Armageddons here? Our opponent can operate on a pretty low land count. Is this where we want the Armageddons? I'm not wholly convinced it is. Which is sad, because obviously I love Armageddoning people. So, I like the Staff of Storyteller. The incremental advantage there is great. Voice of Victory is going to get a lot of work done. We need to stack prisons. Like, all of this seems good. So it becomes difficult to work out what we're trimming. Maybe a Sand Scout and an Ajani. That leaves us needing 1 more cut. Do we need all of these things? Could we just have 4 on the idea that our opponent is probably going to be boarding away from that plan? Or we could take out a Wasteland. Okay, I'll take out Wasteland. Our opponent operates on 1 and 2 mana. Getting an opponent who does that sort of stuff isn't the best. Okay. Turn 1 Graveyard Hate. And then we've got some good tools. Their removal, or the stuff they have that puts our creature in the graveyard, so removal and counter spells. Their removal is an Exile, so we should end up with creatures in our graveyard. So that we can use this Lazotep Quarry. We're also going to be getting a second Lazotep Quarry at some point, I would suspect. This card is cool. I'd rather not have double Ghost Vacuum, but we'll take it. It's going to keep their Murktides out of play. It's going to keep their Barragoyst not doing anything. I think it is the way. If they fight over this on turn 1, that'd be great. But they did not. Would have loved to have got a Force of Will out of this. So we have to beat their fair plan. But their fair plan is a little bit susceptible to Graveyard Hate. A Ponder, sure. Murktide Regents and Barragoyst don't like having very small or 0 amounts of cards in graveyard. Okay, let's Ponder. HELIOS One. Am I deploying this Voice of Victory into a pretty clear daze, or am I just going to play a second Ghost Vacuum? I think it's a second Ghost Vacuum. Just keep their graveyard completely under wraps. and then just play around the days as we go. A Thoughtseize. That's pretty good. I imagine I take the Voice here. I think that's the scariest card because it blanks a bunch of cards in their deck. And it clocks for more than the Sand Scout. We took the Plow. Engine Explosives, X equals 1. Cool. This deck just has too many tools. Well, I guess we're not playing the Ocelot Pride. I'll play out Helios One and get this Voice of Victory down. Try and work out which one of these we should leave open. I don't think it matters. So I need to spend 2 mana to blow these. And we can get an Ocelot Pride down, but then we're probably just going to die to their Entomb Reanimate combo. I'm going to crack the explosives. Okay, I'm going to exile this Engine Explosives. I'm also going to exile our card here as well. So there's fewer things in graveyard for the Barragoyf to enjoy. And a Ponder to follow up, sure. A Guide of Souls would be pretty good here. Oh wow, we drew a Guide of Souls. So this attacks. We get a bunch of triggers here. And then we sacrifice one of these creatures that's going to die anyway for white mana. And that allows us to play this Ocelot Pride. Which then gives us another trigger on our Guide of Souls. We're going to go to end step. We're going to get some Ocelot Pride trigger here. Not bad. Not bad. Is it just going to get undone by Giant Atraxa? Probably. But that is, unfortunately, the way of the world sometimes. Fatal Push on our poor little Guide of Souls. And then a Barragoyf. Sure. So if we draw a land, then we can use the Lazotep Quarry. We did not draw a land. We did, however, draw a useful card here. I think we go Static Prison first. Take out the Barragoyf. And we attack with everything. How many permanents are we going to have here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So we're going to have the City's Blessing in a second. And then we can get this Sand Scout in if we want. But if they daze it, we don't get the City's Blessing anymore, right? I think it's best to just not play this and guarantee the city. Oh no, they can't do anything with this because we have Voice of Victory. Yeah, okay, we're just going to sacrifice one of these for white mana. Get this in. This gets us another Quarry. We go to the end step. We stack these triggers this way so that we make the token, we get the City's Blessing, and then we make more tokens. Alright, opponent. What do you think about this? A Ponder, sure. Atraxa will not be able to save them because of the Lazotep Quarry. So if they were to Entomb Animate Dead, we can sacrifice whichever creature is being blocked by the Atraxa. Is our deck secretly better than I thought it was? Maybe it is. This is supposed to be a fun Geddoning, but actually, we're putting together some pretty interesting stuff here. I don't think we want Geddon. I do kind of want it, but I don't think that's what this game is about, and I don't think we should be playing it that way. I don't think Armageddon versus the combo decks is really where I want to be, but any sort of like mid-range or control deck, we can absolutely try and punish them. Would love to Armageddon a Beanstalk player at some point. That would bring me quite a lot of joy. Okay, well we have a Ghost Vacuum. We have answers to their fair plan. I think we keep this. If we can answer the graveyard and we can answer their fair creatures, I think we're in a good spot. We're going to get in Thoughtseized. What would you like to take here? If I take the Vacuum, it tells us a lot about their hand, and we're probably going to lose. If I take one of the removal spells, then I guess they're just on a fair plan, and then I'm okay with things. I would prefer to have some pressure of some description, but we just got to pay how we got to play. The basic swamp means that we're not going to get dazed on the Ghost Vacuum if we play on one. The fact our opponent's taking a while on this means that it's not as cut and dry as you might think. Right, I've taken the Plow. So they're probably on the fair plan, but they were kind of umming and ahhing over this Ghost Vacuum. Maybe they've got like a piece of interaction to spend on this Ghost Vacuum. I don't really think you want to be Force of Willing this, but if Force of Willing the Ghost Vacuum allows you to Entomb Reanimate something massive, then it is worth doing. Okay, so we've got their first creature answered. We've got their graveyard covered. We need to find some of our own game plan here. But we are putting up a fight. Goodbye, Thoughtseers. An Ocelot Pride. I'm going to play out the Pride. Around a daze. If nothing goes in our opponent's graveyard, we'll obviously eat our own source of Plowshares. We just want to keep the card types down. We have no use for these being in our graveyards either. But we need to do it at a timing when we're avoiding any sorcery speed spells our opponent can play, because we don't want to take something out and then get caught by Entomb Reanimate. Thankfully our opponent's not running any sort of shallow grave type stuff, which can go at instant speed and mess you up. Right, they're milling over a land, sure. Another Undercity Sewers. They're filling up their graveyard. It's going to be not the easiest thing to keep under wraps here. Petty Theft on the Ocelot Pride. So I'll take this Tammy out of our opponent's graveyard so they can't reanimate it. Just keep their card types down, make Murktide Regent harder to cast. All the good stuffs. I will deploy this Ocelot Pride again. Given the amount of lands we have, I'm okay wastelanding our opponent's Undercity Sewers here. Keeping them off of blue-blue might be relevant. We already know they have a blue-blue play in hand. But Murktide in these decks feels so good to me because you put your opponent in a horrible spot. Like, do you handle their graveyard to stop the Murktide? And if you do that, then maybe you give them a window to Entomb Reanimate. But if you hold up the Entomb Reanimate, they just get a big Murktide, and you'll kind of catch 22 really hard with it. I think it is the best threat I would run in, like the best fair threat. A Dauthi Voidwalker. Okay. It's just a guy. We will exile Undercity Sewers. Keep this going. Is this where I want to be spending my resources? Probably not. Play this Plains. I will deploy a Grafdigger's Cage. I don't think we have to path to exile this guy. They can't block because of Shadow. They get to hit us for 3, but it's only 2, and we're making more power every time we do that. If it gets urgent, we can path it. But if we path this and then all of a sudden we get hit by a Baragoyf, we're going to feel real bad. Now we can do some curtailing of a Baragoyf. Right, you can hit us for 3. Be my guest. So nothing that we put into our graveyard is going to pump a Baragoyf. So if we can get everything out of graveyards for a bit, the Dauthi Voidwalker will make their own thing useless. Aha. Okay, so now I think I will plow because they're thought seizing and we're not going to have anything else going on. Alright. Now this plow might help them get that second blue that we took them off of earlier. Sorry, this path. But it is what it is. We get 2 life out of the bargain. We're going to see a Fatal Push on our Ocelot Pride. Just conspicuous black mana that's been left open. Alright, let's take out this Thoughtseize. Cling to Dust. Sure. A Wasteland. Okay. I will wasteland our opponent off of double blue again. We'll crack in with our little friends here. They can't cast a Cling to Dust because of our Grafdigger's Cage anyway. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So next turn we can get the City's Blessing and really pop off with the cats. They could play a Murktide. It'll only be a 4/4. A Brainstorm. Okay, they can't play a Murktide this turn because they don't have access to blue-blue. We're going to keep the Karakas in hand for as long as possible because we want this as something that doesn't get wastelanded. So if they put a monster into play, like an Atraxa, we can then play the Karakas and bounce it. Whereas if it's in play, our opponent will wasteland it before putting their monster in. And that doesn't bode well for us. Let's exile this Cling to Dust. Static Prison. That can be useful down the stretch, can't it? Let's come in with all of our cats here. Now, our opponent has shown us Engineer Explosives in their deck. So we might be able to sweep out all of these cats at some point. Is this some sort of Orcish Bowmaster based action? You don't see many Orcish Bowmasters in these decks. Shoulder's Edict. Sacrifice a non-token creature of their choice. Well, that doesn't give us a lot of choice, does it? I think because we have the Murktide covered already, I'm not going to take anything out just yet. We can rebuy our Ocelot Pride here by paying 6 mana in our Ghost Vacuum. Right, so we're going to see a Murktide. We have the answer for that. Take out something around. See, this won't pump the Murktide because it's only instants or sorceries leaving the graveyard that pump it. Static Prison. You've been sandbagging a Force of Will this entire time. This is probably a matchup where they might be cutting their Force of Wills. Or trimming them at least. Okay, we'll attack. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If we play this out, we can get another land going. And then maybe activate the Ghost Vacuum. So we can go and get ourselves a Tamiyo and an Ocelot Pride. Which isn't nothing. Alright, Ghost Vacuum, let's take this Ocelot Pride. Right, let's come in with the cat tokens. Engineered explosives can be a real dampener on what we're trying to achieve here. Alright, another borrower. That's fine. Let's go for the guide. So next turn, the static prison is going to go down to 0. Okay. So we can put the Guide of Souls underneath the Ghost Vacuum and maybe set that up for next turn and get back a Tamiyo and a Ocelot Pride Guide of Souls combo. That'll give us the energy to keep the static prison around for longer as well. Maybe get the chip damage in with this cat token. Our opponent can start hitting us with these Brazen Borrowers, but they can't be blocking with them. And their live turtle is the one that is under threat right now. A Ponder. Be my guest. They did not shuffle off the Ponder. A Barrow Goyf, you say. That's a pretty good card, isn't it? Alright, so I accidentally knocked my mic off, so I'm now going back and dubbing over the next round or so. So my thoughts might not be exactly as they were at the time, but here we are. So our opponent's got this Barrow Goyf in. We do have an option of drawing some land and getting our Ghost Vacuum going. We can do some pretty good stuff with that. Right, so we're going to continue to eat some stuff. So we're going to put the Guide of Souls in there. If we can draw the land here, we can pop it out. We can get the Guide of Souls going, along with a bunch of other stuff that's underneath the Ghost Vacuum right now. Our Static Prison isn't going to hang around for too much longer, which is a little bit awkward. But if they get back a Murktide Regent, we at least have 1/1 flying blockers. So we have a Sand Scout here that we can play if we want to. This can be something that can block into the Barrow Goyf, because their Barrow Goyf is a 3/4. So if we stick the Sand Scout and the cat in front of the Barrow Goyf, and then use the Ghost Vacuum on the sorcery in our opponent's graveyard, the Ponder, that will give us the ability to shrink the Barrow Goyf and trade with it in combat. Worst case scenario, we lose the Sand Scout, and then the Sand Scout can go underneath the Ghost Vacuum. Then we'll get another creature that comes back with the Ghost Vacuum if we can draw that 6th land at some point. We do need to make a plan for these Brazen Borrowers down the stretch, but the 1/1 tokens from the Ghost Vacuum should answer that relatively handily. So it's our opponent's turn now. They are cracking in. So we're going to go for the double block here. So we stick the Sand Scout and the cat on there. And then after blocks, but before damage, we're going to shrink their graveyard. Take out this sorcery. It's the only sorcery. It's going to make it so we trade for this Barrow Goyf. Now, our opponent has a fetch land over there. They can fetch land and look for an Undercity Sewers and possibly spike a creature or a sorcery and put it into the graveyard. So that could be a bit awkward for us, but sorceries and creatures aren't necessarily the most abundant things in a deck, especially when we already know that they've got through 2 Borrowers and there's a Barrow Goyf in play here and another Murktide underneath the Static Prisons. They're not going to have that many creatures left. So they're cracking this fetch land. What are they finding? They failed to find an Island or Swamp card. Yeah, that was pretty weird to me. I didn't really understand what was going on there. So we kill off the Barrow Goyf. So now that's an even better thing that we can stick under the Ghost Vacuum next turn if we don't need to pop the Ghost Vacuum for 1/1s. Obviously, this is all contingent on us drawing that 6th land. But we got plenty of lands in the deck to draw. So now it's our opponent's turn. They're tapping down for some... Sorry, now it's our opponent's post-main phase. And they're playing a Murktide Regent, taking out the Barrow Goyf so we can't steal it with the Ghost Vacuum. This means we can't Ghost Vacuum away any instants or sorceries without growing their Murktide. They've just got a 3/3 here. So unfortunately, the Static Prison is gone, which means they get their Murktide back. And we didn't draw a land, we drew another Ghost Vacuum. So I think the plan here is, I guess we just play out the Ghost Vacuum, and then we have something that can maybe shrink a potential Barrow Goyf. We've got a little bit of life to work with here. We take 6 on the next turn, then 9, and then it's 12, because of our opponent's Brazen Borrowers and stuff. They can be coming right back in. So now our opponent is just going to crack us in the face for 6, but not before they brainstorm and have a look at lots more cards. Again, this game I think is very winnable if we draw a land. So you can see we've got the Tamiyo, the Guide of Souls, and the Ocelot Pride, and we're about to put the Sand Scout underneath it as well. So we're going to get 4 bodies that are 1/1 flyers. We're going to get a bunch of energy when they come in because the Guide of Souls is going to see them. And then we're going to make some cats at the end step because we're going to have the City's Blessing. So we're going to get double cats, and then double energy, double life gain. It's going to be pretty good for us, provided we draw a land. So we've taken 6 damage here. We're going to exile our Sand Scout. Our opponents left up the mana so they can cast this Brazen Borrower. We're also going to exile our enchantment because that's a unique type for things like Barragoyf. So we're just making sure that we can answer that problem later on if it comes down the track. So we've drawn a Source of Plowshares. It's not the land we want, but this is absolutely fine. This means that we can take out one of these Murktide and mess with the clock a little bit. So we're going to take 6 next turn instead of 9. So there's a little debate as to when we fire off this plow, but our opponent plays a Brazen Borrower. This is our opportunity to plow the Murktide. The Brazen Borrowers, again, we don't care because Ghost Vacuum makes 1/1 flyers. It makes 1/1 flyer versions of the creatures, so dealing with their Brazen Borrowers will be easy if we just find that land. Which feels like a phrase I'm saying a lot. Alright, our opponent is just going to come and crack in for 6. They're going to hold up the mana for their Brazen Borrower here. So they're going to have lethal. If we can answer one creature, we do get another turn still. So a removal spell is good here. A land is obviously the best thing we can draw because that just gives us access to all these 1/1s, a bunch of life to pad ourselves with, and then an increasing board of cats. So now we're just going to the end step here. We're going to exile some stuff for the purposes of Barragoyf. We can just shrink our stuff. And then if we have to mess with their stuff at a different time, we can do that. I'm also saying that we saw the Cling to Dust that our opponent boarded in against us. So they might be boarding in more Graveyard Hate than is necessary. And I wanted to get rid of the Source of Plowshares so they couldn't Surgical it in case that was a weird thing they'd done. We've drawn a land here. So if our opponent remembers they have a Brazen Borrower in exile, then we are just dead here. So we've been off this Voice of Victory and hope our opponent just completely forgets that they have a Brazen Borrower. Suffice to say, this game is over. So they're going to tap their mana at the end step here, and we're going to see a Brazen Borrower come along and ruin our day. That is a tough one. Yeah, a bit awkward that one, but it is what it is. Like, we had many draws that were fine for us for a while. We just bricked for too many turns, but the best deck in the format is the best deck for a reason. Yeah, I think we were very competitive though, and that's something that's worth celebrating, I would say. On to the next round, I guess. And this next round is also going to be dubbed over again, not my exact thoughts at the time, because I turned off my mic. Okay, so we've got a pretty good looking opening hand here. We've got a nice curve. We can go turn 1 Guide of Souls, turn 2 Staff, turn 3 Ajani, draw a card. And then maybe at some point we get to do Ravages of War and just getting our opponent back into the bin. So this feels like a good place to be. What is our opponent doing with their first turn? So Verdant Catacombs could be a whole bunch of different decks here. Okay, Underground Sea, that narrows it down a little bit. But the Verdant Catacombs might just be like a black fetch. But the big tell here is there's a Duress being cast. Duress tends to not be a thing you see in fairer decks, so I'm automatically thinking my opponent is playing an unfair deck. But then I'm confused because they've taken the Ravages of War. And normally an unfair deck won't care about that because they'll win before it matters. So it's just a little bit odd as to why they took the Ravages of War here, rather than the stuff of Storyteller, which could maybe find us some more action. So that's something to think about, why our opponent's done that. Means that if they are a combo deck, maybe they're on a slower combo at the moment, and they need a few turns to sort of sculpt, which suggests maybe they're something more like Ad Nauseam Tendrils, that sort of jam. So now we see a Tropical Island. I don't think there are Tropical Islands in the Epic Storm. I think it's Tigers and Underground Seas and the Surveil Land versions of those. So I'm thinking more towards Ad Nauseam at this point, and they're doing a Ponder, trying to set up. But our plan here is the only thing we can do is a poor defenseless little white deck. We're just going to be playing some bodies, turning them sideways, and hoping for the best. So our opponent's taking a little while on this Ponder. And they've decided not to shuffle on the Ponder, and they've just played out a Bauble, and they're immediately cracking it to get through that Ponder quicker. Which is interesting. They could do it in a different way so they can save cards from things like Thought Seizers, but then they can play into Bowmasters, but I don't think they care about Bowmasters that much. So interesting cracking the Mishra's Ball when they did. So now we play Plains. I think we play the Staff of the Storyteller or the Ocelot Pride here. You could play the Ajani because it is slightly more power on the board, but I think we need to try and go over the top of what our opponent's doing, maybe find some Wastelands or get another Geddon so that we can strip out their lands. Our opponents told us they want to play more turns of Magic the Gathering. That's what taking the Ravages of War means, so I think it means we've got some time to maybe draw some cards with the Staff of the Storyteller, and that's going to be our sort of plan here. Right, so our opponent's turn, they've got another mana source, another one to get eaten up by a Geddon hopefully at some point, but we'll see. Alright, the Misty Rainforest being cracked now. They've got themselves 2 Underground Seas. And they're pondering for a while here about what they should do. Not the card ponder, just thinking. So they're starting to go here. So this is a Cabal Ritual, that's up to 3 mana, Lines Like Diamond. They should know they're pretty safe here against the white deck in game 1. Infernal Tutor, they can crack the Lines Like Diamond here. And that's going to give them access to a bunch more mana. Yep. Okay, so now they're just putting the Ad Nauseam on the stack. So the Cabal Therapy... the Cabal Ritual they've got kicking around here is some starting mana if they can get above 2 mana here. So the Lotus Petal plus the Dark Ritual, so it gives them enough mana here, and they have enough Storm going on here. And they can just go through a Beseech line, sacrificing their Lines Like Diamond. But one thing our opponent has to be aware of here, we're at 21 life, so you can't just do the normal math you would do of getting to Storm 10. You need to add in the extra factor of casting another spell. So it is possible that our opponent maybe could make a mistake here because they just autopilot through, but generally Storm players are pretty cognizant of all the things that are happening. So our opponent begins playing out their spells. So you've got Lines Like Diamond, Lotus Petal. They're going for the Dark Ritual. The Dark Ritual then goes into the Cabal Ritual, which is going to be lots of mana because of Threshold. And now they can Beseech the Mirror, but they can also Duress us first just to get that extra bit of Storm going. So they can Duress us, yep. They see that we've got nothing going on here. And now they Beseech the Mirror, sacrificing the Lines Like Diamond for Storm 10, cast Tendrils for Storm 11, and that is going to be the game, I think. So a pretty decisive win from our opponent there. We didn't really pose much of a clock, and we also didn't have any disruption. This is going to be a bad matchup for a mono-white aggro deck. So we get to go to the sideboard. We've got a lot of tools for this. We've got ourselves some Graveyard Hate in Grafdigger's Cage to stop things like Gaia's Will lines. We've got ourselves Null Rod, which is excellent, and Deafening Silence, and Mindbreak Trap. So we've got a lot of stuff, and we've got a bunch of things we don't want in removal. So Source of Plowshares, Static Prison, these both just get out of here. I don't think we really want to go into like the Armageddon stuff. Like I said, the unfair decks tend to want to go underneath that sort of thing anyway, and we'd much rather have creatures to pressure so that we can maybe make Ad Nauseams worse. I'm now thinking about the Ghost Vacuums. I don't think they're very good here because they're not going to be very useful against a Gaia's Will, and we end up shaving some stuff. We end up with 1 Armageddon left when we're sideboarding here. So we have the option of maybe blowing all that lands up at some point. We're basically just going to be leaning on Deafening Silence and Null Rod. Maybe the Disruptor Flute on like a key turn is going to be useful. We'll find out. So this curve is a very good fair curve. The problem is our opponent isn't playing fair, so we can't keep this. Now we've got ourselves a hand that doesn't do anything because there's no lands, so we mulligan again. And then we've got a hand that doesn't interact with our opponent. It's okay, but again, I'm not really sure we can keep a hand that looks like this. We need to mulligan to something to interact with our opponent. So this hand has lots of interaction, doesn't have our game plan, but we have lots of interchangeable bodies that we can draw. So we're going to put back the Armageddon because it's a bit of a later game thing because it costs a lot. And then we're going to have just 2 pieces of hate because we're on a multi 4. We don't get to keep the Sand Scout. So we're going to keep double hate, double lands, so that if we draw any of our monsters, I say monsters, our little critters, they get to come by. We want to play out the Deafening Silence first because the Deafening Silence gives us the ability to just ignore their Storm abilities, whereas the Grafdigger's Cage just cuts off 1 line with the Gaia's Will. So it's way better to get the Deafening Silence. And this is like our big trump card in the matchup that we're hoping to leverage and win from. So our opponent's obviously not happy about seeing the Deafening Silence come down. They need to decide are they playing out their spells? Because if they play out like artifact mana, it's in play, which means we can interact with it, but then they're getting spells out of their hand, so that they're committing to the board if they have to go a little bit slower through a Deafening Silence and they've got some hate cards they want to cast. So this is probably what our opponent is tanking on and thinking about. A whole bunch of different things. Okay, so they decided to go for the lowest spell in the end. And they're just trying to get their resources ahead of them. And then we draw another absolute top tier hate card. So we get to jam down the Null Rod. So I imagine our opponent's quite likely to have a response to this. Let's see if they have one or not. Because they can sacrifice the lowest petal, floating the mana, and then when the Null Rod resolves, they can spend that mana. If they're trying to get rid of the Null Rod. I don't know which is the bigger impediment to our opponent's game plan, the Deafening Silence or the Null Rod. Like, they definitely 100% cannot win through a Deafening Silence because they will never get enough Storm. But are they more worried about the Null Rod? Okay, so they are more worried about the Null Rod. I find that quite interesting. I don't play enough Storm to know if that's correct or not. I assume our opponent is a competent magician. We find another piece of hate in Mindbreak Trap. We don't have a win condition, but we at least have the ability to stop our opponent winning, which is something. So our opponent's going to have a turn here, and what are they going to fire off? It's a Duress. So we can just take this Duress, lose our Grafdigger's Cage, which was the weakest piece of hate we brought in anyway. So I'm okay losing that. And then we have the Mindbreak Trap in hand, so we're sitting relatively pretty. If our opponent can blow up this Deafening Silence, then combo off in one turn, we can at least answer that with a Mindbreak Trap. I'm not sure how many discard spells our opponent should have post-board, because generally speaking against white decks, they're going to be using permanents. So having a permanent that like shuts down whatever their combo is probably a thing that they know we're trying to do. So I would imagine more like wear downs and Besages and stuff. Anyway, so we've got our threat in now, the Sand Scout. We're cracking in with it. We've got another threat to follow up with in this Ocelot Pride. We're just hoping that we can get over the line before our opponent finds an answer to the Deafening Silence. We've already burned one of their answers by getting rid of their Besage by having the Null Rod absorb it. They're going to Thoughtseize us and take our Mindbreak Trap. That's 2 more damage for us, which makes an eventual Ad Nauseam worse. But I was kind of hoping to leverage that Mindbreak Trap at some point. So we're going to attack with 2 creatures here. There's a debate as to whether or not you play out the land. I prefer keeping it in hand, so our opponent has to think about maybe Mindbreak Traps. Maybe we get another Thoughtseize out of them and get a little bit more life, and we can clock quicker. Our opponent is Brainstorming. That is going to be their only spell this turn, so we don't have to worry about that one very much. Alright, so we're definitely getting another turn because they can't play another non-creature spell. So it's back over to us. We can send in with the team here. I think at this point, we're more inclined to just play out a land here because we're counting the number of permanents we have for the purposes of the City's Blessing and getting more cats on board. Alright, it's our opponent's turn. Are they going to find a way through this, or have they had enough? Because we are pretty close to lethal with the damage we're representing right now. Alright, they're just passing the turn by the looks of it. Nope, they're playing something in the second main. Okay, so this is just going to be a Chrome Mox. This is going to get themselves some mana ready for next turn. This could be like a green source. Okay, so it's a black source. It could have been a green source and maybe they'd have Force of Vigor, but I don't think these decks can run Force of Vigor. And we draw another Null Rod. So rest in peace, opponent. That's not going to be where you want. So they've already tried to get rid of one of our Null Rods. We're going to get loads of cats now because we've got the City's Blessing. And our opponent is very dead next turn, and I believe they're about to scoop it up any moment now. Have we entered the scoop phase? We have indeed. So we go back to the sideboard. I don't believe we need to change anything with our sideboard. I think it's pretty much just what we want here. So we're just going to hammer that submit button and go back in. Like, we don't want Ghost Vacuum, especially not on the draw. Like, they can stop Threshold, but that's not really relevant for the most part. And yeah, that's about it. Let's go to this game. This is our opening hand. We have a Mindbreak Trap, so we have some interaction for our opponent, which is better than nothing. Our deck doesn't actually produce any coloured mana with this opening hand, but again, we have the things so we don't die on turn 1. Our deck has a lot of white sources because we're a mono-white deck, so we're odds on to find them. And even if we don't, we can still Wasteland on our first turn cycle, which gets us some value, restricts our opponent's ability to do anything. Now we're getting hit with a Thoughtseize, which is not great because the Mindbreak Trap goes. The fact that they saw the Mindbreak Trap in the previous round means that they might have boarded more hand disruption in than they had in game 2, which is, again, not ideal. I'm not sure the configuration of our opponent's deck though. So looking at this board state, I think the correct play for us is to, I guess it's the Wasteland, isn't it? That's the only thing that makes sense here. So we're going to go to our turn. We drew the white sauce. Great. It's just good deck building knowing you're going to draw it. But I think just trying to strip them from resources rather than trying to do nothing and maybe get a threat on turn 2 or 3 and then start beating, it's just not going to work against a Storm deck. We need to pressure their resources, stop them from being able to actually execute their game plan, and then try and win the game from that point onwards. But if we don't draw a hate card, I think our opponent's just going to free roll their way to victory here. There's quite a big pause in our opponent's turn, which suggests to me that they're thinking about how to execute the combo and whether or not they can this turn, so counting up their mana and Storm. And it doesn't look like they got there, so now we can play a land. So I choose here to play the HELIOS One. The reason for this is if our opponent doesn't think we have access to white mana, they might take things a bit slower and feel they're a bit safer, and they might not go for it. And, you know, sometimes they don't have a deterministic win, but maybe they want to get another turn. But if we're pressuring them and stuff, maybe they go, okay, they've got planes, they might be able to play Deafening Silence, we probably just need to go. Whereas if we hide the planes, that's the thing that our opponent doesn't necessarily get to play around. So our opponent's starting to play spells now, which is obviously terrible news for our little mono-white creature deck. So a Duress, checking the coast is clear off of this Chromox pitching Duress. There's 3 cards in our opponent's hand. So this is Dark Ritual, and then it's another Dark Ritual, so that's 5 mana. So this is Ad Nauseam or Beseech Line. What are they going to go for here? It's a Beseech Line, so this is going to get them Gaia's Will, and this is very deterministic because they can play this Chromox again, they can play Ritual, they can Beseech the Mirror, sacrificing the Chromox, and then we're just absolutely cooked. Yeah, so there goes the Gaia's Will. Storm count is 7. Storm count is going to be 8 off of this Dark Ritual, and we're not going to let our opponent play it out because we are very dead here. So that is the end of that match, and that's 3 rounds down now. So we're always going to struggle with our deck against some sort of combo-y spell-based deck. If it's a creature deck, we can maybe point some swords to plowshares, but alright. We're into round 4 now. Our opening hand here is pretty good. Our opponent is on the play, so just jamming an Ocelot Pride. So we're into some sort of weird mirror. Cool. So now it's our turn, and we'll play our Ocelot Pride. Let's see how this pans out. So they can try and offer the trade here. I think I would probably take the trade if possible. But I'm not sure if our opponent wants to offer it. It's clearly going to be very dependent on what the cards in their hand are. They've got 4 cards left. They've already played out their land. They're going for a Voice of Victory. Now this is something that can just gobble up Ocelot Prides they're attacking, so it kind of blocks our attack. So our opponent feels safe and they're just passing the turn. That's understandable. So it's over to us, and we have the ability to double spell, so we can break serve here effectively. So we can add to the board whilst removing from their board because we have removal spell plus 1 drop. So we can kind of flip the race a little bit because we have this Ravages of War in hand. If we can get far enough ahead when we play Ravages of War, it's just going to end the game. So we can Static Prison this, and we can take out this Voice of Victory. Obviously, it's going to come back at some point, but hopefully we'll worry about it later. Now, we can offer the trade with the Ocelot Pride, because if this happens, we play our Ocelot Pride in hand, and then it's going to generate some value for us. And we can get their creature off board. So our opponent is going to block here, which surprised me. I'm curious that they took this block. And then something weird is probably about to happen, isn't it? Here it is. Force of Virtue. This is a card that I'm basically not aware of. So it's an Anthem effect. Creatures you control get +1/+1. You can cast it in your opponent's turn if you pitch a white card. So it's like the other force effects. But we did gain life this turn, so we get to play a guy and make a 1/1, but our opponent's guys are going to be bigger. As you can imagine, an Anthem effect in the mirror is going to be pretty darn good. So now it's over to us. Sorry, now it's over to our opponent, and they can start attacking in with this Ocelot Pride because the first strike is really good. They've got a Thalia, so they're just on sort of like White Weenie creatures type stuff. I doubt they're going to be playing Armageddon though. So now it's over to our turn. The Static Prison is burning down. We've got ourselves another land. Our opponent didn't play a land so that we don't get the Sand Scout. So we could hold the land so that if they play another land, we can Sand Scout. So considering we're not like double spelling anyway, I think keeping the land in hand to try and get some value out of the Sand Scout is worth thinking about. I think it's worth keeping it that way. And we're just going to sort of stare at each other for a little bit. Our opponent's going to get to crack in a bit with this Force of Virtue enhanced team. That's, you know, our life total is designed to take a beating here and there. We can live with that. Okay. They decided not to attack, which I think is a mistake, but they're obviously fearful of something. So the creature is almost coming back with Static Prison. And we have some options here. So we can play out an Ajani, we can play out Voice of Victory, or we can play out Sand Scout. Sand Scout clearly the worst because we're not getting any procs off of it. If we play out the Ajani, we can get an Ajani Planeswalker, and that's really good. We may as well play out the land at this point so that we can get a Planeswalker and leverage ourselves into a situation where we Armageddon, and then we have a Planeswalker on board, and that's probably going to take over. So we're going to try for this Ajani, and then we get to keep one of them, which then flips because the other Ajani is dying, and then we end up with a Planeswalker here. So we have some options. If we plus this, we end up with a bunch of cats that are a pretty meaty size. Also, the minus on Ajani is really interesting to consider in a matchup like this. So what the minus does is they choose one card of each type for each non-land type, and they get to keep that. Everything else goes. So if we were to pop the ultimate, they would lose 2 of their 3 creatures. And if we can do Sand Scout in a way that gets us a token, the tokens from Sand Scout are red. They're red, white, and green. So this token from Sand Scout will give us the ability to use the 0 of Ajani and actually dome their creatures, which is a pretty big deal in a creature mirror matchup like this. But our Anthem is a Planeswalker, which is going to do additional things every turn, and their Anthem just sits on the board, and they've had enough. They're absolutely off it here because Ajani's just going to go over the top. So pretty interesting. I wasn't expecting the mirror when I signed up for this with this deck. I think the only card we really want from the sideboard are some Path to Exiles. They obviously seem pretty darn handy here. In terms of what we're cutting, that is a little bit of a trickier one. Obviously, we can trim some Armageddon type stuff, but if our plan is to just get ahead and then Armageddon, that's an okay plan. But if we end up with like 2 Armageddons in hand when we need to be trading resources and making sure we're keeping at parity because our opponent has very similar cards, I think getting rid of the Armageddons makes sense there because they're going to clog our hand up with 4-drops, and it's all about what happens in the first few turns. Alright, our opener here is a creature that snowballs on its own, plus 2 removal spells in a creature matchup. We also have the Quarry, so if our creature dies in combat, we can bring it back as a 4/4 later on. Our opponent's beginning the game with a Bolt Land and a little cat. So we have a choice here. We can either get rid of their cat right now, or we can play our own cat. Considering our opponent has shown us they've got Anthem effects, I think we just want to get the cat gone. That way we're not at the mercy of the ferocious Pussycat ruining our day. Because if we play our Pussycat, they remove our Ocelot Pride, and then they start jamming, and then all of a sudden they're getting ahead. We need our opponent to not be ahead with material. So now it's our turn. Our opponent's got a Voice of Victory in play. So this is an annoying one. It doesn't snowball because the tokens get to go away end of turn, but it is really annoying. So I think we're going to go for a Static Prison here and just try and slow the game down a bit. We've blanked our opponent's Wasteland by playing a Flagstones, which is nice. And we're hoping to draw something here. And then we can kind of leverage the fact that we've got a lot of lands, so we can play an Armageddon and keep lands in hand if that's something we draw. Our opponent's played a Windbrisk Heist. I haven't seen this for a long time. If you're unfamiliar with it, it's a hideaway land, so you look at the top 4 and put one of the cards underneath it. And then when you attack with 3 or more creatures, you get to play it for just the 1 mana. So we're going to pay on the Static Prison here, and then we're going to deploy our Voice of Victory here. And I think this is the time to Surveil. If our opponent wants to Wasteland, that's fine. So now there's an Armageddon. How does Armageddon change things? I quite like the Armageddon here. I think we're going to keep the Armageddon. We're going to end up in a really weird situation, I think, in this game. Our opponent has no idea we're doing Armageddon nonsense either, which is where Armageddon is often at its most powerful, when it's a bit of a shocker and your opponent's just getting bodied. So they're paying 3 life. This suggests to me that my opponent doesn't have another land, because if you had another land, you'd probably play it. So they're using this Witch Enchanter on this Static Prison that was going to go away in a couple of turns anyway. And we have a creature that can block either of their creatures. So now it's Armageddon. What are we going to do with it? Well, we're going to fire on the Armageddon because we have the Flagstone, so we automatically end up with 1 land more than our opponent anyway, and our board stops them from attacking. Now, we can't attack either, but we don't think our opponent has lands, and they've only got 2 cards in hand. This seems like a good place to be. We have the lands, so we can just play stuff, draw some creatures down the stretch, and we're all good. This is something that we've been considering as an option throughout the game, and who doesn't love casting Armageddon, right? So our opponent is in the tank a little bit here. I think they're trying to work out if they're attacking or not, because they can attack here for 5, which is pretty good. We get to block 2 of it, though. So we're only taking 3, and then on the crackback we hit them for 3, but then they hit us for 5. So they do win the race if they start turning their creatures sideways here. But our opponent seems a little reluctant to do that, which I'm perfectly happy with. So now it's time to jam a Voice of Victory into play. And now they can't attack at all, because if they attack with their Witch Enchanter, we just eat it. They could attack with just the Voice of Victory and force through 1 point of damage a turn if they wanted to, and we can't really attack. Well, we can attack okay into the Witch Enchanter, I guess. But I think they probably want to be trading damage here, but they decided to... Well, we'll see what they decide in a minute. They've got a Chrome Mox down, and they've put an Enduring Innocence, and now they've got their cats. So in mirrors like this, the cat is kind of what everything is about. And now it's our turn to have a cat. So we play out the quarry first. And now we can play out the cat. So whoever finds life gain first is probably going to start pulling away in this game. Again, our opponent could have been attacking, but now it's difficult for them to attack. The Lazotep Quarry means that if our opponent tries to exile one of our creatures, we can sacrifice it, and then we can bring it back with the quarry later on. So we can make some interesting trades in combat as well, knowing that we can get one of our creatures back. So I like our spot here. Our opponent not having lands is a spot I enjoy, but that says something about me, I suppose. So this Plains, we probably just want to play it out so that we have more mana for the quarry later on. The quarry can only make a creature at sorcery speed. We're not sending in an Ocelot Pride or anything. We're just going to sit back and wait here. All right. Our opponent is trying to find land, I guess. That's probably the main thing on their agenda. They can't attack now, so we're just staring at each other. Guide of Souls. This is huge. This means that if we draw any creature from this point on, we just snowball out and win the game. So I'm pretty happy with that draw. Now, we do need to draw another creature. And there's definitely possibilities that we don't draw another creature because there are things that aren't creatures in our deck. But what the Guide of Souls gives us the ability to do now is we attack with this Voice of Victory. We make a bunch of tokens, and this gives us the energy because we stacked it the right way. So the energy allows us to make our Voice of Victory jump. So now we get to crack in for 3, which is not a small amount of our opponent's life total. They're only on 15. So we get the damage in with the Voice of Victory. And then they can just chump block these. They can just gobble up these things. They should put their Ocelot Pride in front of one of the 1/1s in case they that way they can get the life gain. But they might be worried that we're running some sort of Anthem effect. But we've got no cards in hand, so there's no reason for them not to just gain that 1 life. It was just a missed opportunity, I think. All right, it's our opponent's turn, and we are pulling ahead in a massive way here. What is our opponent's solution to this increasingly sweet board that we have? We also have the City's Blessing as well, so when we attack next turn, if they don't sweep up our tokens, then we get additional tokens, so we could maybe attack with more creatures, depending on how safe we want to play it. Our opponent managed to find another land. It is a Wasteland though, so it's not giving them white mana. I'm also assuming they're going to be very reluctant to fire this on our quarry, because that's just going to be them going down at land, whereas we have plenty of land to play the game with, and considering what they've seen, they know our curve is pretty low, so we will operate pretty well under 3 mana, whereas them under 1 mana might just mean they don't get to cast any spells for the rest of the game. So our opponent is in the tank here. This has to suggest they have some sort of interaction. If you have a creature, then you're just playing out your creatures, right? But if you've got some interaction, you're probably deciding where to point it. Okay, so it's a March of Otherworldly Light. They go for our Guide of Souls. I make a huge punt here. I should sack it to the Lazotep Quarry. Not sacking it to Lazotep Quarry is a huge error, because if we sack it, then it's in our graveyard, and the life gain is so clutch to how we're trying to play this game right now. So now they're going to try and Solitude our Voice of Victory. Having realised that I made this little punt on not sacking the Guide of Souls, we're now in a situation where we want to sacrifice the Voice of Victory, I think. I think the life gain is less important off of this Solitude trigger than having a creature that we can get back with our Quarry is. Especially since it'll be a 4-4. So we're just going to sacrifice this and move on our jolly way. So our opponents still can't attack because they're in the same position they were before. They're down to 0 cards in hand. They've got 1 land and it's a Wasteland. Obviously the Chrome Mox has given them some mana to work with as well. So we've drawn a Flagstones. Not the most exciting, but it does give us the ability to bring back this Voice of Victory. Because the Lazotep Quarry is 2 plus X, where X is the mana value of the creature you're trying to return. So we can use this Quarry to get a 4-4, but if we'd have done this differently, we could be putting a Guide of Souls into play, a 4-4 Guide of Souls into play instead, and then when we attack with a Voice, it gets pumped up and flies in the sky. So we had some better options if we'd have used our Lazotep Quarry to sacrifice our Guide of Souls. Just important to note that. But having the 4-4 Voice of Victory is clearly the biggest thing on the board and quite exciting still. So over to our opponents. What are you working with here? They found a Squadron Hawk. Haven't seen a Squadron Hawk in Legacy for a very long time. But it's kind of neat. It's a draw 3. So if you're unfamiliar with Squadron Hawk, it's a 2-mana 1-1. When it enters, you search your library for any number of cards named Squadron Hawk. So basically you just draw out 3 cards as copies of Squadron Hawk. So we've got a Wasteland, so we can use this Wasteland to mess with our opponent's mana. We can keep them off 2 drops quite easily. The Voice of Victory will trade into multiple bodies if they want. If they want to kill the Voice of Victory, they have to put multiple things underneath it. So we're going to be able to force damage through, or we're going to take material off the board, and either of those is a win for us. So the Voice of Victory, they're just cleaning up the little tokens and then taking 4 there. So our opponents, on a 2-turn clock, if they carry on blocking in that fashion, but they can obviously block the Voice of Victory with a load of stuff and kill it, or they can just chump block it. Okay, they drew a Source to Plowshares. That's about the best thing they can have there. So now we're sort of staring at each other again, where our opponent's got a reasonable board and they've got some more birds in hand, and we've just got nothing. So we're holding this Plains in hand, so at least our opponent's thinking about something. Obviously, they don't have to think too hard on their turn because of Voice of Victory, but it's our opponent's top decks that we're most worried about, I think, here. Alright, our opponent clearly has something here. We know they've got 3 Squadron Hawks. It doesn't look like they found the land, because they would have just played the land and then the Squadron Hawk. So the other thing they have here must be either some sort of removal. It has to be removal, right? Unless they're thinking about how they're attacking. Right, our opponent's getting around to doing something now. So they're exiling cards to the March of Otherworldly Light to take out our Voice of Victory. So now we just have 1-1. So they can start attacking here if they want. I think they should start coming in and putting some damage on us. I think that's the correct way to play this. They decide no. Fair enough. Okay, we've drawn a Guide of Souls. That's obviously a pretty good draw for us. We need to find a creature so we can start the life gain going again. And then just start snowballing out of these tokens. That's really what this game is about. Who's gaining life? Our opponent has the opportunity to attack us again and they decide not to, which is very nice of them. A Wasteland isn't the most exciting thing. We're looking for a creature. A removal spell isn't the worst, but we're just looking for creatures really. So we're probably just on another turn where we sit back and wait for our opponent to draw their card. Hopefully it doesn't ruin us. Then we get a chance of drawing something that breaks the game open. Just a really weird stalemate. A lot of this has come down to the fact that we Armageddoned earlier, and it's just changed what our opponent can have access to. They didn't cast anything, and now we have a Source to Plowshares. So we could just fire off his Source to Plowshares. I think that's a reasonable thing to do. I think Source to Plowsharesing the Ocelot Pride is an okay-ish thing to do here. We could also Source of Plowshares is one of our own guys. That gains us some life, which then starts our Ocelot Pride making more tokens. But I don't really want to use my resource because we go down a token to go up 2 tokens. That's not really worth it for a high impact card like Source of Plowshares. So I think we probably just have to pass it here. Our opponent said GG in chat, which is very bizarre. Okay, so they're exiling a card to play Force of Virtue. This game is far from GG's. I don't know what they're talking about. So they're pumping all their guys. So they are bigger, but we've got loads of life. If they turn their guys sideways, we can just take it. Now, if they gain life, it is awkward, but they're a little ways away from playing out the City's Blessing, which is nice. The Windbreast Kites isn't going to be that important because we have the Wasteland already, and we're going to have plenty of mana for anything we draw. How much damage do they want to come in with here? Because they could come in with the Ocelot Pride, and that's reasonable here to gain some life. We would have to put so many things underneath it that they're going to get a really good trade up here, but they decide they just want to nibble in with the Voice of Victory. So we actually get to gain some life here. We can put an Ocelot Pride. Actually, no, we don't get to do that because they're 2/2s. We just let them come in. We don't get to use our Source of Plowshares because our opponent's got the Voice of Victory popping around. But they didn't try and gain any life to make any tokens. That's good news for us. We've got a Quarry here. So this game is about... I said this ages ago. This game is about the Ocelot Prides and going wide with them. So we're going to fire them with a Wasteland, take out their Ocelot Pride, and we've got this Lazotep Quarry for the future. We could like play it next turn, sacrifice our guy, try and make a 4/4. I'm still very confused about this GGs that our opponent was talking about though, because this game is very far from over. And I think we are in a pretty good spot because, you know, we've got lands. Every card we draw is, you know, playable. Whereas our opponent, a big chunk of their deck is just completely uncastable to them. Are they going to start getting in with some damage? Like, they could have been chipping us away. We could have been, like, at, you know, 16 or something like that by now if they wanted to. But now they're chipping in with the Voice of Victory. We can just take it. I don't think we have to care about that. It's not about that. Okay, we've drawn an Ocelot Pride. This is the literal best draw in our deck. So we play the Ocelot Pride. This gains us enough energy that we can now attack with, like, an Ocelot Pride and give it flying. Yes, our opponent said O in chat. Yes. The GGs that you were talking about, where are they? Because they're certainly not here, because we are the ones GGing you. Okay, so we bash in for 3 here. They can chump block if they want, but we just gain 3, and we go to the end step, and then we're going to make many, many cats, because the cat sees the other cats. So, as you can see, we're going to be gaining a whole bunch of life and making a whole bunch of tokens, and we're getting pretty close to just an alpha strike that we can send in anyway. Our opponent is in trouble, I would say. I'm not really sure what they can draw to get out of this. They would need to, like, play their own Ocelot Pride and gain life, but they don't have the City's Blessing, so ours is just going to be better. And they're not going to be playing any sort of sweeper because they're playing a little Mitty creature deck like we are. So, yeah. Okay, well, now we've got GGs the other way. Very good, opponents. I think your premature GGs by just having an Anthem was not really the way there. So, yeah, pretty good. Win in the mirror there. All right, we're on to the final round. So, our opening hand here has got a creature that scales on its own and some removal spells. And the HELIOS One means that we can make sure that the stack prison doesn't go away, which is quite nice. So, we'll drop the Ocelot Pride. And now we're just seeing what sort of deck our opponent's on, if they're going to wombo combo us, or if it's something where our removal spells are actually going to look good. Hopefully the latter. A Bloodstained Mire. What are they doing with this? Passing. So worst case scenario would be something like an Entomb. That would obviously, you know, kind of go over the top of what we're doing, but we've still got some options against like a creature because we can remove with stack prisons and such. But we're going to start making some little guys here. And we've got the Voice of Victory coming in. And any second now, or, well, pretty soon, I think the actual regular commentary for when I was actually recording it is going to kick back in. So you're going to bid goodbye to Cyrus from the future, dubbing it in, and say hello to Cyrus of the present. So our Voice of Victory here. They could daze this. I guess worst case scenario is they go, like, go and fetch for an Underground Sea and Entomb and then daze it. That'd probably be like the worst thing that can happen here. But they might not be that sort of deck. They could be a Jund deck or like a straight like black reanimator deck that's just taking a turn off. There's a lot of options of how this turn could play out. There could be a combo deck. But they're thinking a long time about this Voice of Victory. So I think we have to assume that they are some sort of blue deck that cares about Voice of Victory. Because otherwise, what are you waiting for here, right? They must have interaction. Unless they just stepped away from the computer. Which, you know, sometimes happens. Sorry, my mic has been off and I don't know for how long. So I have to check that in edits. Yes, Voice of Victory. Can we get it in here? It's an entomb. All the things we did might not matter here. Cool. Oh, and they got days as well. Cool. Do they have the reanimates? At least let them have the animate dead so they don't get it this turn. That would be something. We do have an answer to Atraxa. It's not a permanent answer though, so we need to be a little bit worried about that one. Reanimate? Why wouldn't they have it? Alright, here we go. Quite a bevy of options to choose from. I imagine Force of Will and blue card is going into their hands. So probably Force of Will, Tameo, one of the lands, and the Orcish Bowmasters. Orcish Bowmasters. We got Orcish Bowmasters, Force of Will, Polluted Delta. Okay. That's not really how I wanted this game to go. I'm going to deploy a Static Prison into our opponent's Force of Will. They're going to Force of Will this, I suspect. There it goes. And I'll play this Helios One so we can play around a daze. And I'll cast Static Prison again. Goodbye, Atraxa. In come the squad. We get to deal them a little bit of damage here and make another friend. If we don't draw anything useful, we can still just Helios One, start charging up our energy banks to make sure this Atraxa never comes back. Now, Orcish Bowmasters is probably coming down here to kill our Ocelot Pride. That is a little sad. Oh, it's a Murktide. Okay, that's a different kettle of fish. Obviously, it's also a problem. I think we are in Elegant Parlor mode. Staff of the Storyteller. It's good. It's a good card. But we know they have an Orcish Bowmaster, so I don't really think we can deal with that right now. This is... We can add energy anytime. We can only activate it as a sorcery when we're popping it. I'm not going to try and force through 2 damage here. I think we just have to be sad about it. So they probably attack us for 8. Orcish Bowmasters down the Ocelot Pride. They have to have another land drop here. But maybe they just feel so comfortable they can afford to ponder for it. And if they miss, it's not that big a deal because they've got like a massive block and they can just hold it back on blocks for a turn. I assume we're getting hit for 8. There it is. Alright, let's charge up my energies. Static Prison, we say yes. Wasteland. We attack with everything here. We get blown up by Orcish Bowmasters. There it is. Goodbye Ocelot Pride. They can just block both of our cats if they want to as well. Just the one cat being blocked. Okay. We're not going to do this because we might be able to get a sand token off of our guy. I think that's better than wastelanding our opponent here. There's a ponder. Yeah, so we can get the sand guy. We can play it, then wasteland, and we get a 1-1, which is a red permanent, which helps our Ajanis be better if we can get to that stage of the game. Alright, I don't think we need to keep playing this. Yeah, they're going to bounce our Static Prison, and we're going to have a sad time. Okay, so we've seen this before. We want these things, and we want these things. What are we getting rid of? Is it Sand Scouts? I think that's what we got rid of before. I don't think we got rid of all of them though, did we? Something like this allows us to keep 1 Geddon. We're going to keep a Geddon, it's the last round. We're going to get rid of one of these and keep a Sand Scout. I want to get a second Geddon. Maybe we can cheese our opponent with the Geddons. Do I like the Staff of the Storyteller into my opponent's Bowmaster? Not especially. We're going to have a 3rd Geddon. Yeah, let's have a 3rd Geddon. Let's try that. I don't think this is right, but sometimes You just want to get in people, and that's what we're here for. For the best Eternal experience this summer, check out Eternal Mania in Hasselt, Belgium from August 8th to 10th. Aside from hosting the European Legacy Masters, they have a whole host of other tournaments from team trios to old school and pre-modern. I will be there playing Legacy and hanging out as a special guest. This will also be the first event that I'll be giving out my own special Marital Age tokens, so why not come down to enjoy an awesome weekend ran by one of the best TOs in Europe. Right, this is aggressive hand. We don't really get through a lot of the graveyard stuff here, but I think we have to keep a hand that looks like this. The Lazotep Quarry is pretty good. This card has been impressive today. It's a card I'm wanted to draw quite often. Guide of Souls. So next turn we can go Guide of Souls, or we can go Voice of Victory. I don't really know if I want to play Voice of Victory into a daze though. So I think it's Guide of Souls. And then we get killed by the Engineer Explosives. Tamiyo? It's a Tamiyo, sure. Okay, I think it's Ghost Vacuum first, and then it's the Guide of Souls. We can offer up one to a daze here. We did not get dazed. There's no point attacking to 0-3. Really not looking forward to Engineered Explosives here. It will take out their Tamiyo, so that's at least something. Yep, attacking with a Tamiyo, I think it's correct too here. Obviously we don't know what their hand is. Maybe there's some other things to think about, but there was definitely a pause when they were deciding if they're attacking. And there's the Ponder. Did they keep a one-lander with Tamiyo Ponder? Maybe. They shuffled off that Ponder. They have a basic swamp. You know, Thoughtseize us as well. They are. Goodbye, Voice of Victory. Take out one of the cards from their graveyard. HELIOS One. I do like the sound of generating more energy here. And the HELIOS One out. Tap some guys. At some point we can bring back the Voice of Victory with our Quarry. But we are in a reasonable spot. There's definitely some stuff that could jam us up. They're going to go after this HELIOS One. I would like an energy, please. That is a Wasteland not being pointed at our Quarry, which I think is the better card here. I don't think energy is going to be the bottleneck for this particular game. Exile their Ponder. And Ajani. Let's get the Ajani going, shall we? It's a lot of energy. You crack that clue token, opponent. A Force of Will. That is a shame. We'll attack with the squad. So we can try and get an Ajani back with our Quarry if we want to. The downside of doing that is that it won't be able to flip because it'll be a token. It's not like the actual card. It's a copy of the front side. So you don't get the back side. So I think it is probably just better to get the Voice of Victory. Obviously, pretty banging combo with the old Guide of Souls. Little turbo machine gun of energy. You staying home, Tamiyo? I bet they'd love to try and flip this Tamiyo. A Wasteland. Not really the one we want. Although if we put the Voice of Victory into play right now, we can't actually. We need one more mana, right? Because this is 2 plus X. So we need 4 mana. So 1 shy. Alright, I think we're attacking again. Yes, Orcish Bowmasters can exist and ping us around. Now they're going to 8 here. Undercity Sewers. Good. I think I'm going to Wasteland that. Keep them off of blue. Makes it harder for them to cantrip into good stuff as well. Yep, they take 4. So things are getting a little bit dicey now. Goodbye, Undercity Sewers. Okay. I like how we sideboarded. Let's just go back in. No Graveyard Hate. No enters the battlefield untapped white source. This is a mulligan. Okay, I'll keep this one. What are we going to bin off here? Hand is pretty good. Maybe it's the Quarry. We don't really need that just yet. Alright, Undercity Sewers. They're going to immediately put a giant monster in the graveyard off the Surveil. It's always a dream. They left a card on top. Okay. So we could be dead next turn. We just don't know. I will play a Guide of Souls, please. Right, there's an argument for not playing anything, so that if your opponent plays Entomb Reanimate, you can kill the attraction on the stack before they get the cards to protect it. Right, that is a Tamiyo. I'm going to plow this Tamiyo. I'm going to play this Ocelot Pride. Is this worth a daze to you? It probably would have been, which means they might not have a daze. Orcish Bowmasters. Ah, the bane of my existence sometimes. Okay, sure, goodbye. Now, are we playing out the voice or are we playing out the Ajani? Which is better here? I kind of like the voice, to be honest. Because once the voice is in, everything gets better. And we have more bodies to protect a flipped Ajani. Right, Force of Will, Pitching Brazen Borrower. We've whittled through a lot of our opponent's stuff. They've had answers to just about everything we've done so far. And they just have the leftover body of the Bowmasters hanging around. But hopefully the Ajani can do enough work. Right, I like having the planes a lot here. It gives us the ability to play around days. Gives us the ability to hold up something like a Path to Exile. Okay, Ajani. It's on you now. I don't think they're attacking into the Ajani here. But the threat of reanimated monster is always looming. Alright, I didn't fancy it. Prison. Am I attacking here? We attack for 2. Does this favour us? If we just sit around and wait, our opponent's reanimates get better. So I think we are attacking with the Cat Warrior token here. And then we just take it. I'm probably going to see Surveil Land unless they have something like a Borrower they want to put in. Surveil Land, sure. Maybe there's a tasty Armageddon in our opponent's future. A Ponder, sure. A big old Barragoyf, sure. I think at end step we will just fire in a Path here. They get their Swamp. Primed for a nice Armageddon here. We're going to take out the majority of mana producing lands in their deck. They decline to use the ability. Is that because they know what's on top with the Ponder? I suspect it is. Right, let's attack with the Cat Warrior. Lowering our opponent's life total makes our spells, makes their reanimate worse. So it's pretty key to attempt that. Alright, Voice of Victory, out you come. As long as we don't get Entomb reanimated on, I think we're okay here. A Brainstorm. That could open up a whole multitude of possibilities. Okay. We're doing something in the second main phase, or do I get to have a turn here? They're going to Thoughtseize us to take one of our static prisons. This takes 2 life off of our opponent. That's not too shabby. I think a static prison is better than shocking our opponent, but shocking our opponent and making them discard a card, effectively. That's what the Thoughtseize going away is. Oh. Our opponent's just had enough. Okay, we managed to dodge their graveyard stuff and win the match. Okay, so this league was a 3-2, and one of the rounds we lost was against Blue Black Reanimator, and it was really close, to be honest. We just couldn't quite stop their like last Murktide, really. And we lost to the Storm deck, where we just didn't have any interaction and we just couldn't win. But yeah, this deck felt really good. And what's more important, the Armageddons weren't like a triviality. They were something that actually came up and won us 2 separate games. And it wasn't really getting caught in our hand and being bad either. So big thumbs up to Armageddon here. I think, like, obviously everyone knows the Guide of Souls, Ocelot Pride, like Ajani, Voice of Victory package is pretty good. You see it in the black-red decks. You see it in the white-red decks. You see it in the white-black decks. And Staff of the Storyteller is usually in the black builds. And Sand Scout is quite often in the red builds. But this giving you sometimes a red, green, and white Sand Warrior is really useful for the purposes of the Ajani and makes that a lot of a better prospect. But honestly, this deck felt pretty good. I would say the Lazotep Quarry and the HELIOS One both overperformed. And the Elegant Parlor, I think, underperformed. It's only in here so that when we Armageddon with the Flagstones, we can go and get it. Or if we get Besaged or something, we can go and get it. But I think this should just be another Plains. Or potentially another like activity land. Maybe there's like a White Desert that does something. I don't really know. I didn't look, to be honest. I just wanted to play the Quarry and some HELIOS One. But yeah, both of these cards surpassed my expectations. I've been wanting to play the Sand Scout build for a while. And I'm pretty convinced by it. Sand Scout on its own is pretty mediocre, to be honest. But the Lazotep Quarry is really good. So having something that can shoot for it is probably worthwhile. I was happy with the sideboard today. It kind of did all the things we needed it to. Sure, we got beaten by the Storm deck, but I think, you know, Null Rod, Deafening Silence, Grafdigger's Cage, what more can we realistically do there? Yeah, really happy with this one. I hope you enjoyed this one too. nice to see some White Weenies actually being viable in 2025. I wasn't sure, but I think this deck is perfectly viable, and if you were to fine-tune this and refine it, I wouldn't even be surprised to see this top 8 a challenge or something. I think the core of what's here is very powerful, and Armageddon is like an I win button, and that's something that is quite useful in Legacy right now, and just being able to say, actually, no, you don't get to play Magic anymore, is pretty good. Maybe we don't need 4 of these effects. Maybe we just need 1 and 1, and then we just have a couple more slots for interaction, or like another creature that we can beat down with. There's various options available. But yeah, this deck was really sweet, and I hope you enjoyed it. Please remember to like and subscribe. There may be a lot of blue-black reanimation in the format, but we're certainly finding ways of having fun, and I hope you are too. Alright, goodbye. If you'd like to support me in the channel, please check out my Patreon. It has a free guide to budget turbo depths, as well as 3 tiers of support. A low-cost one that enters you into my monthly raffle for a free donation deck on the channel, a mid-tier subscription that gives you access to my detailed turbo depths guide that is updated every month, as well as regular articles, and lastly, the higher tier gives you all of the above, as well as a monthly donation deck for my channel. If you're interested in supporting the channel this way, please check out the link in the description.